Greetings once again everyone, and today I'm pleased to be testing out a new low budget lens from Nikon, which is likely to end up being pretty popular, the Z 40mm f2. It's only for their new mirrorless Z system cameras, and it costs $300 or £250 here in the UK, and I'd like to thank Nikon UK for loaning me this lens for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. I liked the idea of this lens as soon as I heard about it. It's clearly meant to be an affordable nifty-fift style lens, except obviously with a wider angle, and personally I love that 40mm focal length. I think it's greatly underappreciated. It gets you a perspective very close to that of the human eye and still offers a reasonably wide angle, but with a nice little emphasis on your subject. This kind of lens will be useful for all kinds of different photography, and the bright maximum aperture of f2 means it'll also be useful for shooting in darker situations and getting noticeably out of focus backgrounds in your images. The lens is very lightweight at only 170 grams. When it first arrived in my office, I found that it wasn't quite as small as I was expecting it to be from product images I'd seen beforehand, a tiny bit bigger than most of the low budget 50mm f1.8 lenses that I've handled in the past, but still it's fairly small. In an obvious bid to keep down costs, the lens's body makes extensive use of plastic. The focus ring and even the rear mount are all plastic, without any visible weather sealing, so avoid using this thing in torrential rain or using it to hammer nails or throwing it across the room or whatever. The focus ring does turn very smoothly, and the focus motor responds to it well. Some good news for video makers is that the lens doesn't really show much in the way of focus breathing, as you can see here. The lens's autofocus motor is excellent. It works very quickly, confidently and accurately. It emits a very quiet whirring sound as it goes, which is barely audible. The lens does not feature image stabilization or come with a hood, and its filter size is 52mm wide. Overall, the build quality of the lens is one of the most basic I've seen in a long time, but it does actually work very well with a very good autofocus motor. Alright, let's look at image quality. As usual for a Nikon lens, I'm testing it out on my Nikon Z7 with its full frame 45 megapixel sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. At f2, in the middle of the image, we see excellent sharpness and contrast, and I can tell you now that when you stop down to f2.8, it even gets just a little sharper there. Well, let's look in the corners. At f2, they look a little softer, and the contrast is much hazier, but the image is still holding itself together acceptably well. Stop down to f2.8 and contrast becomes quite good, although resolution in the very corners is still a little low. However, stop down to f4 and we see a dramatic improvement with excellent sharpness now and contrast in the corners, and at f5.6 we see perfection. From here, it's only when you stop down to about f11 that the image begins to get a bit softer due to diffraction, and f16 looks a touch softer again. Overall, this pattern of image quality very strongly reminds me of that of a low-budget 50mm f1.8 lens, except a bit sharper. The corners on this Nikon lens are never really soft, but you'll want to stop down to f4 or darker if you want really sharp results across the entire image frame. Still, not bad at all for a low-budget lens. Let's look at distortion and vignetting now. These images are taken with in-camera corrections turned off. As you can see, the lens projects only very slight barrel distortion here. At f2, unsurprisingly, the corners look quite dark. At f2.8 and f4 they do brighten up, so you'll want to keep at least vignetting control on here in your camera. Let's take a look at close-up image quality now. The lens can focus down to 29cm, which is a little closer than average for a standard lens. Shooting close up at f2 does cause contrast to drop out though. Stop down to f2.8 and it improves, and at f4, close up image quality becomes really nice and sharp again. Let's see how the lens tolerates bright light, and the answer is reasonably well, although one prominent flaring spot is clearly visible. Let's take a look at the lens's bokeh now. When shooting at f2, you can get pretty out of focus backgrounds here, especially when shooting up closer to your subject. Generally speaking, the lens's bokeh is nice and smooth, in my opinion. It handles most situations pretty effortlessly, although very difficult backgrounds can generate a little choppiness. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. It is tricky to see here due to the soft close-up image quality, but there's only very light colour fringing on bokeh highlights to be seen. Stop down to f2.8 and f4, and anything that was there has gone away. Overall, well, this really is a dead simple lens, from its basic plastic construction to what's on the inside. Its optical construction is actually only made of 6 glass elements, which is very basic for an optic with a slightly wider angle. But it has a number of real strengths as well. Those 6 glass elements do generate a good amount of sharpness. Its contrast is pretty nice, its autofocus fast and reliable, its bokeh fairly soft, well, in most cases anyway. There's not really much more you can ask for from a lens at this price point, and it'll be really useful for all kinds of different photography situations, so it does come recommended. Thanks for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. I love putting together these lens reviews. They are a bit costly and time consuming though. If you'd like to support the channel and keep things trucking on here, then check out the link to my Patreon in the description below. There's all kinds of interesting content there for regular supporters, including monthly exclusive videos, so do go over and check it out, and ciao for now.